Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. The evolving public health crisis has had a unique impact on Canadian cannabis retailers. Industry leaders Darren Bondar, President and CEO of Spirit Leaf, and Eleanor Lynch, COO of Kiaro, reflect on the past year, the opportunities it has created, and the lasting impacts it will have. In a retail landscape that's built on perseverance and agility, a lot can be learned about championing innovation and resilience in unpredictable times. I moderated this panel discussion on May 13th, 2021 at the Retail Cannabis Forum, hosted by Retail Council of Canada. Let's listen in now. All right, well, let's get ready for our next session. I'm going to be moderating this next session, how COVID impacted the retail cannabis landscape. I'm joined by Eleanor Lynch, Chief Operations Officer with Kiaro, and Darren Bondar, Founder, President, and CEO of Spirit Leaf. Eleanor and Darren join me today to share their experiences. Hi.
How you doing here?
Very good. I mean, both of you are going to join me today, share their experiences of this past year, how COVID has reshaped the vision. Darren, I'm going to kick it off with you. For the first kind of question, I'll ask you both a little bit of kind of an elevator presentation speech, a few minutes about who, what, and how your organization works, and a little bit of recent news that you had. So tell us about yourself and some of that news that maybe some of us have heard from last week.
Sure. Well, Spirit Leaf is an organization that we started about 4 years ago in hopes of really being one of the top cannabis retailers across the country. And we wanted to be a very entrepreneurial organization that was really had a strong corporate culture. And over the last few years, we've just continued to build along with our franchise partners and our employees. And tomorrow we're about to open our 88th store in Saskatoon.
Congratulations.
And we're operating, thanks. We're really excited about that. It's our second store in the market, and we're operating coast to coast from BC to Newfoundland in over 50 different cities through a combination of corporate and franchise locations. So it's been a great ride. We're all very passionate cannabis enthusiasts and passionate about the industry. And I guess the news you're referring to is the latest acquisition where the Sundial Group is acquiring us, which I think is very exciting, going to be, I think, great overall for us and for the industry as we continue to support all LPs and really the industry as a whole. So we're excited about it, and really just the next evolution as we start to focus on global aspirations, and this gives us some additional financial bench strength and to be able to execute on those plans.
Well, listen, congratulations, creating that kind of value, creating value over, 4 years. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a great ride and team effort all around.
Listen, tell us a little bit about Kiaro and how you go to market, and a little bit about the organization.
Sure. Yeah. Great. Thank you again for having me today here to represent Kiaro, and certainly COVID-19 and how much of a challenge it's been. But in terms of Kiaro, we're headquartered out of Vancouver. We have 7 locations in Western Canada right now. We're operated. We have an operator license for Ontario, so we're hard at work in terms of expanding into the Ontario market. We also operate a wholesale business in Saskatchewan, eCommerce, and last mile delivery. So we kind of have our hands in a lot of different buckets. Super busy. We have a new store opening in Kelowna coming soon, hopefully August of this year. So busy folks over here.
Well, congratulations. And I've had the pleasure of being in your stores. Great people, really innovative layout. I really enjoyed the experience. Why don't we just kick it off with a little bit? I'm not going to dwell too much on, history here in terms of COVID, but I did want you to take us back to that moment where it dawned on you last year that this was not a thing that was going to kind of pass, but this was going to be a marathon of stops and starts, and you're going to have to learn how to operate in this environment. Take me back to that moment and what you were thinking.
Yeah. So we were open. It was March 18th, 2020, and we were opening our Port Moody location. It was set to open that day, and they had announced a public emergency. So it stuck out in my mind for obvious reasons. We were opening a store. We had 3 more stores to open that year. And you could just tell from the sentiment, from the global news, from the reports that were coming out, this was going to be really something unprecedented for the last 100 years. And getting your team through those hurdles and how they could come together and, not kind of get stuck in that mind frame of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? So I remember it. I spent about 6 weeks opening and closing the Port Moody store as we supported staff to make sure that they, if they weren't feeling well, they didn't have to come in and all that kind of great stuff. So it was a crazy day.
Well, speaking of crazy days, they haven't stopped, right, Darren? I mean, right up till today, we get Ontario announces an extension to the closures. I mean, you've gone, the industry's gone from illicit to essential to non-essential to whatever it is in different provinces. How do you keep up? How do you even at a local level, how within your network, coast to coast, do you keep up and then adapt to those changes amongst you, your team, and your franchise partners?
Yeah, it's shocking actually that it's still we're still talking about this 14 months later. I think that's the biggest surprise for me. But like any good marathon, we're going to dig deep till we hit that finish line. And for us, just in operating in all these different provinces, we really rely on our managers and our local franchise owners to ensure that we're following all the various protocols. So kudos to our frontline staff and all the entrepreneurs, Spirit Leaf entrepreneurs on the ground. It's just been a nonstop pivot, and I guess we feel pretty fortunate in cannabis retail compared to most restaurants and retailers. So we try and look at the bright side, but definitely looking forward to being able to open our doors again in Ontario and getting back to some sort of normal retail environment, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm looking for that euphoria moment in the marathon. I haven't hit that yet, but I think I don't want to hit the wall first. But let's talk. I mean, a unique characteristic I think about retail cannabis is while retailers, depending on whether you were hit by the shockwave or the sledgehammer, were either just trying to operate or just not open, where cannabis retailers were opening many stores. So that's a whole different thing. So what are your three things that kept you going and the three ways that you were able to continue to open stores at the clip that you needed to open them?
Yeah, it's been challenging for sure. And I feel bad for many of these franchise partners who were doing big ribbon cutting ceremonies, and you cut the ribbon and you can't even open the doors to let people inside. So
it's crazy, right?
We're looking forward to doing those second cuts at a hopefully not too far away. But yeah, it's just really firstly keeping everybody safe, and then trying to stay on top of what construction we can do, what we can't do, but persevering. And I think that's the cannabis industry as a whole, which I don't necessarily think the industry gets enough credit for the perseverance, even from the initial LP days and trying to get licensed to retailers now trying to get open and licensed through all the various different municipalities and provinces. It's just perseverance and keep your head down, ensure you're doing everything that's compliant and safe, and just keep grinding away at it. I don't think there's really any other choice.
You raise a great point. I often say that cannabis retailers, if anyone could have been built for this COVID era, it's cannabis retailers as a whole, because you already were agile. You already were used to overcoming and putting barriers in front of you. So to me, it's no surprise. I think the entire retail industry looks now to cannabis retailers with admiration. Like, we need to be as agile as a sector as cannabis retailers. Eleanor, you're a veteran retail operator. You came out of traditional retail. As you think about the COVID era now and moving forward, communication so important. Your people so important. Part of your DNA is understanding how to communicate. Communication so important. How has this changed for you? What did you do different during COVID? I've heard retailers, for example, they're trying to figure out you do store tours all the time, store checks all the time. How have you adapted to this to kind of keep the people, the momentum, and the culture within Kiaro?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it was really hard. I think the big thing about communication is that one of the things that was really prevalent at the time was that sense of urgency. And as that sense of urgency can be conveyed through communication, it can be very dangerous. It can really kind of miss things that are important to other people, how people are feeling. So really, I think it taught me to slow down. It's important to be decisive in an emergency. It's important to pull your troops together, but it's really important to slow down and be very mindful of how this situation is impacting people in the different ways that communication will be important. I also think that, to your point about in-store and personal visits and that personal communication and not being able to do that. But it was really hard too for associates who wanted to have this great opportunity to educate consumers about cannabis that might be new to it, to share different stories, and they really couldn't. And so creating barriers in stores so that they were safe was so important. So communication really became resisting top-down solutions, really trying to cultivate bottom up. I think Darren alluded to that. How do you cultivate, store manager in Victoria versus a store manager in Saskatoon or L'Orange, a very northern store at the northern tip of Canada? Those are different needs in those communities. And so making sure that your communication channels are set to operate in that fashion.
I think one of the lasting or lingering challenges, and I think we're starting to feel it now, the old saying, right, there's no cash registers in head office, is your home office support, your head office should be supporting the field, but it's really, I think it's challenging, right, where head office folks are actually mandated to stay home, where they've got folks operating on the front lines. Have you experienced that kind of schism, right? It's like, hey, we got to be out there, but other folks in general, in some ways have to stay home and operate. How do you manage that? How do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great point. It was really hard because people wanted to go to the stores and support, and you were like, listen, we can't have a lot of people in the store. So yeah, it was a real challenging situation. But I think what we did was we celebrated that passion to support the front line and found other avenues through which they could support. So whether it's, finding the best masks for staff, whether it's, sending care packages to stores, changing store hours. That was the other thing, to your point about no cash registers in HQ. It's something I'm incredibly passionate about, is making sure everybody knows, listen, it all starts and stops in the store. So how do we find ways to support?
Yeah, no kidding. Let's talk about the store for a bit. So, one of the things that in industry-wide really was accelerated was curbside and home delivery, certainly from e-commerce. Now in Saskatchewan, you've always had the opportunity to home delivery. Talk about how important that is to you, the whether it's curbside or whether it's pick up in store or home delivery. Is that essential? And my follow-up question, where I'm kind of going with this, do you see that there's a ghost kitchen model where that just becomes the only way that you start a brand and you could just engage in home delivery and some kind of pickup? Is that viable, or does the store still matter?
Well, I'll get to that. So what do I think about delivery? I think it's so important to give a consumer a choice. So how can we get you product that's meaningful to you in a safe way, a compliant way, and to ensure it doesn't get into the hands of youth is an incredibly important component of operating in regulated retail. So it is very a complicated matrix in terms of cost and profit centers. They can get away from you. So you got to really manage how you do it. And so, last mile and delivery, we were one of the earliest to launch it in Saskatchewan. It's always been, a good addition. I think on the question of, retail's clearly changed. We've all been changed by this. And what that looks like is so uncertain in terms of how that permanence sticks for us. Ghost kitchens for retail, I love the idea. I'm not sure how you do that safely, because the consumer needs to be home when you deliver the product. And so that's always a challenge with liquor or cannabis delivery, is how do you create a service that's accessible, but at the same time, you can't be flexible on delivery. You either got to be there or you don't get it. So right on. I'm not sure if you can do that, but you've tickled my brain on the question. I love it.
Well, it's kind of the idea that do you need a physical store? I mean, many restaurants, they go through a different network and they try to then master kind of home delivery. My expectation for e-commerce, let me just pull that thread a little bit. My expectation for e-commerce in the cannabis sector was that customers would come into your stores, both of you, and experience the product, choose their brands. We saw some great segmentation from Liz, and then do more replenishment online or home delivery. Is that been, Eleanor, has that been your experience in Saskatchewan? And Darren, chime in on that one as well. I'd be kind of keen to see what your observations have been.
I'd love to hear from Darren on that. I think that I think the reason I brought up that piece of it in terms of the delivery and the consumer being home is that the volume of transactions in people's lives are so busy. COVID might be a unique situation where a lot of people were at home. That I think that it's a different dynamic in the industry we are in. But in terms of e-commerce, I think that getting people the things that they want is definitely the forefront of it. So I'd love to hear Darren's thoughts on it.
Darren, what's been your experience in the different markets that you operate in?
Well, I think retail today, whether you're in cannabis or any retail, and you've talked about this lots, is really it's omni-channel. So I think every touch point is important, whether it's an e-commerce delivery or a reserve and pickup or an in-store experience. I think they all go part and part. The governments and the provincial governments right across the country really mandated for cannabis retail the importance of stores. So I think that stores are going to exist. Would I be surprised if they changed the rules? I'd actually be surprised here, where I'm not surprised most of the time. But I do hope that what COVID has created is some learnings for the provincial governments that, hey, we can do delivery very effectively. We can do it safely. We can ensure it stays out of youth's hands. And that's a big part of stamping out the illicit market. So I'm hoping that it continues in some jurisdictions where it's been forced upon us through COVID. But I guess that's to be seen, and the regulators will do what they feel is correct and right for the provinces and the industry.
I mean, certainly the advocates of Retail Council of Canada have been advocating for that. I mean, you make a great point. I sometimes describe it as, when you're having toast in the morning and your toast falls off the table and lands butter side up. It's kind of like, COVID wasn't great, but maybe there's something good that comes out of it, and maybe it advances the whole idea of home delivery more than it would have advanced without COVID. I mean, maybe there's an upside somewhere, if you can say such a thing about such a time. Darren, let's talk about retailing and product and assortment. I'm curious if we're there yet. In the early days of retail cannabis, there wasn't much supply. It kind of had to sell what you could get your hands on. You're now, I think, retailers have the luxury of being retailers again, making choices. Is the product there? Speaking, if LPs were listening, are the LPs there yet? Are you getting the consistency, the freshness, the variety? Talk about that. What's your perspective on the assortment?
I'm so impressed with the licensed producers in Canada and the amount of innovation that's coming out and the quality of products. They're really doing an incredible job, and it's improved, and it continues to improve week by week and month by month. I think that growing flower, and kudos to all the horticulturists there who are doing such a great job. It's difficult to always get that exact product consistency from grow to grow. There's so many variables, but I think what we're learning and what we're seeing in the industry is just we're getting deeper. We're not talking about just sativas and indicas. We're talking about terpene profiles and cannabinoids. So I think the product is there. I think that it's going to continue to improve. I think we've seen some short-term supply gluts with COVID causing them, but in the long term, we're definitely starting to see improvement. I think Ontario is going to go to a flow-through model shortly for some of it, which will just make it even better and stronger for retailers and craft producers. So yeah, I think we're seeing it, and we're going to continue to see great and more innovation, and which will be great for consumers.
Now, if I was standing in one of your stores, are everyone has to have a point of view. I mean, we're at the point now where people probably have to go buy one or two other cannabis stores to go to either of your stores. They have a choice to make. Is your assortment a point of difference for you? On a spectrum of, experience, location, assortment, are you making choices along the lines that say, oh, if I close my eyes, I'd know I was in your store just by the assortment? Like, how do you think of the assortment from a strategic perspective?
Yeah, I think assortment is key. And what I can speak anyway for Spirit Leaf, we really like our local ownership model, as it allows us to really customize down to each community and neighborhood. So the data is important, and we work with Headset. That's a big part of it. But the second element is really ensuring that product matches the consumers for each local community. So I think having a great selection and assortment that speaks to your consumer is as important as the brand experience in your location and all the other key retail elements that we're familiar with.
Eleanor, I want to pick up on that a little bit, because I know community is very important to you in Kiaro, and you have innovative ways of connecting to your community. And I also want to connect to the product side. When I was in your store in Vancouver, you had a nice array of a terpene selection. I thought it was very informative, and it was so well done. Talk about how you're thinking about the assortment. Are you happy with the product that you're getting? Are you at the point where you're making decisions? Yes, no, we're going to go this way, a different way. Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, well, thank you for the compliment. Appreciate that. There's lots of people behind the scenes that appreciate hearing those things. I agree with Darren. I think that the product assortment from the LPs has really, really come a long way, and really innovative, great products, and so much choice. So I think that the thing I'm really passionate about is I think retail is local. I think if anything has changed in our society, it's when you want to go to a shop that's your local shop, you want it to feel like your shop. And so assortment becomes key for that. And so, yes, we do say yes to some and no to others, and, like to give new shots to small LPs across the country that offer something different. And maybe it's a different way of growing it. Who knows? So I think we're really passionate about how do we, finding a producer that's from your own community. How great is that? Anybody wants to say, hey, I picked up this great strain, and I know Judy, she grew it 10 years ago. So now seeing somebody successful and transitioning over to the regulated market, there's so many things to celebrate when it comes to product and keeping it local.
Have edibles as a category and concentrates, have they met or exceeded your expectation in terms of demand from consumers? Were you thinking it was a nice expansion of the assortment to add some more margin in the category? Where are you on that spectrum of meets or exceeds, or maybe perhaps didn't meet your expectation?
I love the question, because I think that it's bound by the regulations. So based on how they've approached what is allowable from an edible or a beverage perspective, I think some work needs to be done in terms of reevaluating that. And so for the companies and the LPs that have worked on these products, I think they've done a fantastic job of bringing to market, edibles, beverages, concentrates, hash, you name it. There's a lot of options for consumers to try based on what your needs are. So lots of great brands and options on shelf.
Are you happy with the flavor profiles, Darren? Like when you're mastering edibles, drinkables, whatever, it's not just about the ingredients, but it's the flavor profiles and do they taste good? Are they good to consume? Are you happy with them, Darren?
Oh, yeah. I love the edibles personally, and I know our consumers are loving them too, from all the chocolates to the various flavors of gummies. I think I had a watermelon gummy the other day, or last night even. It was delicious. So I think, I think it's there. I think the beverages too in Canada versus what they've been able to innovate in the US are really coming along as well. So and I do believe the beverages will continue to improve in flavor and variety. To Eleanor's point, particularly on beverages, there definitely needs to be a change very quickly from Health Canada on the limits. You should be able to walk into a cannabis store and buy 12 to 24 beverages, no different than you can buy alcohol. It's frustrating for us. It's frustrating for our consumers to only be able to buy 4. But that change is going to come. I know it's being worked on. And kudos definitely to the manufacturers. They're doing a great job of producing some terrific product that's not, that you don't have to smoke.
Yeah, you're happy with them, Eleanor?
Yeah, well, just sorry, Darren, I thought you were done there. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but to Darren's point, I'm so glad he said that. Pick up a beverage if you haven't tried it. They're so good. Or an edible. But I do think the beverages get underplayed, and they're great effect. I think that they're so consistent. I don't know, Darren, if you've had the same experience, but, they're really great.
Yeah. Oh, totally agree. I think the beverages are great. And I think it's a category it's just in its infancy here. We're talking like 1 or 2% of overall sales, but beverage is a socially acceptable way to consume. So instead of choosing alcohol, I really hope that backyard barbecues are now choosing cannabis beverage over liquor. So I think there's just a huge trajectory ahead.
I wanted to touch on one thing. The Act is up for renewal in the fall. That process starts. So Deanne Breesbaugh at the beginning was saying that we're launching a working group. And part of that is and we do these reviews all the time across all number of sectors, right? Much legislation always by parliamentary decree comes up for renewal. And that's certainly one element, on behalf of the retailers, we would be looking to talk about. If we want to be successful and get to your objectives, there's a few things that need to happen. That might be one of them. Eleanor, I'm going to throw the last question to you, and it's kind of a big one, but it's a short question. What does innovation look like in cannabis retail?
Yes. Well, listen, technology is here and it's staying. So what does brick and mortar look like in the future? It's very exciting to consider. It's one of the oldest industries, right? Selling your wares. And I think that I think you made the point earlier that it's not been the most agile of industries. I come from, as does Darren, traditional in-mall brick and mortar. It's a slow-moving beast. And so I think that what retail looks like and the different revenue streams and omni-channel approaches, to Darren's earlier point, I think retail looks very different than has looked for the past 50 years. And I'm excited about it.
Well, I mean, it's a great point, and I often wonder why sometimes it takes a crisis for change to happen in our industry. Well, we've got the mother,
scary, right?
Right, we got the mother of all crises. I actually think, Darren, I'm going to lie. I'm going to say, Darren, I'm going to ask you a question. I think the innovation is yet to come in the retail sector. I think the past 18 months and whatever's left in COVID will be, at the end of the day, everyone's too busy just figuring it out, and that the innovation will be to come. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of innovation to come. What I can say specific to the cannabis industry is really how impressive, and to Eleanor's point, the technology, the fact that most stores have been able to quickly adopt, and that's thanks to our point of sale providers and all of the ancillary products. But the fact that we've been able to so quickly adapt to online retail and online menus and the digital game and texting, I think cannabis retail, for being brand new, is quite far ahead compared to our traditional retail experiences. So I think it's been quite refreshing. But I do agree with you, Michael, and you certainly have more insight than most that there's still going to be a lot of innovation ahead. And I hope that cannabis can be trailblazing like that, as they have in the cannabis industry, on the retail industry as a whole.
Well, listen, I can tell you, when I do presentations at very large corporations, they always ask for, what are you seeing? What's innovative? What's different? And most of my slides are from the cannabis industry. I'm like, if you want to look for innovation, nimbleness, agility, and just really interesting ways to go to retail, look no further. It's here. You don't have to go any further. Okay, I super lied. One last question. Any trends that either of you are seeing in terms of cash or payment types that you could speak on, kind of from the before time to now? Are you seeing less cash, more Interact, more credit cards? Anything jump out to either of you?
Definitely less cash. I mean, that's the one thing, is everybody's tapping their phone, and isn't that great? How seamless can that be?
Well, tapping the phone too, not just tapping. So you're finding that is kind of getting a bit of pace to it? Yeah.
I mean, that's like the number one growth I see in terms, I don't know, Darren, if you're seeing the same thing, but people coming in and just thumb on the phone and putting up against the payment terminal is definitely what I'm seeing.
Darren, do you allow kind of Apple Pay and these kind of payment types in your stores on your POS?
Yeah, whatever payments are allowed, we accept, short of Bitcoin right now. But I think once the Safe Banking Act...
Dogcoin. Take some Dogcoin.
That's right. But I think once the Safe Banking Act passes in the U.S., that's also going to open up a lot more payment options. There are some limitations still in the cannabis industry, particularly online. You can't use PayPal, those kind of things. So I think there's still a way to go, but I agree. We're going to be at a cashless society pretty quick here.
Well, never a dull day in the retail cannabis sector. I'd like to thank both of you for joining me. It's been a really great exploration. We barely scratched the surface, but I feel that from every presentation today, the one industry, the one sector of our industry that uniformly is, as I said, agile, growing, opening stores, contributing, doing all those great things. So thank you both for joining me. Thank you both for being such great leaders and thought leaders in the industry. Darren, congratulations again on your corporate news. That's fantastic. Just great news and continuing to highlight the value that is there in retail cannabis. Eleanor, I look forward to seeing you on the West Coast.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And thanks to the RCC and yourself for all of the attention and positive news. You help elevate the cannabis industry, so appreciate that.
Agreed. Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of The Voice of Retail. Be sure and follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts so you don't miss out on the latest episodes, industry news, and insights. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating review, as it really helps us grow so that we continue to get amazing guests onto the show. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of LeBlanc Company Inc. And if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at meleblanc.co. Until next time, stay safe, have a great week.